China signaled on Sunday that it would not back down in the face of a 100% tariff threat from President Donald Trump, urging the US to resolve differences through negotiations instead of threats. China's Commerce Ministry in a statement mentioned, China's stance is consistent. We do not want a tariff war, but we are not afraid of one. Frequently, resorting to the threat of higher tariffs is not the correct way to get along with China. The response came 2 days after Trump threatened to jack up the tax on imports from China by November 1st. This was in response to new Chinese restrictions on the export of rare earths, a key ingredient for many consumer and military products. The back and forth threatens to derail a possible meeting between Trump and Chinese leader Xi Jinping and end a truce in a tariff war in which new tariffs from both sides briefly topped 100% in April.
Something historic is happening, quietly, powerfully, and faster than anyone imagined. For nearly a century, the world has spun on a single axis: the power of the U.S. dollar, the reach of Western corporations, and the dominance of American military might. Every nation's economy, every barrel of oil, every global deal, all tied to Washington. But now, the axis is shifting. From the copper-rich plains of Zambia to the high-tech corridors of Shenzhen and Bangalore, a new alliance is forming. Africa, China, India. Together, they reconstructing a world the West can no longer control. A $10 trillion economic transformation that could rewrite every rule of global trade. Most people don't see it yet. They're still watching old powers argue in conferences and wars. But behind the headlines, the real revolution is economic, and it's unfolding across 3 continents. Think about this. Africa holds 30% of the world's mineral resources: cobalt, lithium, gold, oil, gas, and rare earths that power every smartphone and electric car. China builds 70% of global infrastructure and controls the largest manufacturing base on Earth. India is now the world's fastest-growing major economy and the new tech capital of the global South. Individually, they're strong. Together, they're unstoppable. And that's what terrifies the West. For decades, Africa's minerals fueled Western prosperity. China's cheap labor built Western wealth. India's software powered Western innovation. But today, they're doing it for themselves. They're creating trade systems that bypass the dollar. They're building payment networks independent of SWIFT. They're investing in one another, not in Wall Street. When the U.S. imposed sanctions on nations, Africa and Asia didn't retreat, they adapted. They built new trade corridors, launched the African Continental Free Trade Area, and expanded BRICS into a global financial powerhouse. The West calls it competition, but the rest of the world calls it freedom. This isn't the fall of America. It's the rise of everyone else. And as we speak, deals worth trillions of dollars are being signed, from oil and gas partnerships to cobalt refining and 6G data networks. This is the biggest wealth shift in modern history. The world's supply chains are being redrawn. Currencies are being redefined. Power itself is being reimagined. So, how did this happen? Why now? And what comes next for the old world order? Let's break it down. For centuries, Africa was called resource-rich but cash-poor. It supplied gold for European empires, diamonds for Western jewelry, and oil for global industry. Yet its people remained trapped in poverty. But something changed after 2015. African leaders began to ask a simple question. Why are we selling raw materials for pennies when we can refine them ourselves? That single question started an economic awakening. In the Congo, cobalt refineries are being built on African soil for the first time. In Nigeria, new pipelines and gas terminals are being designed by Africans, for Africans. Ghana, Namibia, and Zambia are partnering to process lithium and copper locally, not ship it overseas. Across the continent, young entrepreneurs are creating digital banks, solar startups, and AI companies that rival Silicon Valley. By 2030, Africa's population will reach 1.7 billion, most of them under 30. That's a workforce larger than China and India combined. And this time, Africa isn't just exporting minerals, it's exporting innovation. Kenya's fintech sector is worth billions. South Africa leads in green hydrogen. Rwanda and Ethiopia are emerging as manufacturing hubs. The African Continental Free Trade Area, launched in 2021, connected 54 nations under one market, 1.3 billion people with a combined GDP of over $3.4 trillion. Add the new resource policies, like cobalt export restrictions and local processing mandates, and Africa's leverage has exploded. When Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso rejected Western military bases and began forming their own security alliances, it sent a message far beyond Africa. Economic independence requires political independence. The world took notice. In 2024, Chinese and Indian investors poured record billions into African railways, solar plants, and tech cities. Western analysts called it a challenge. Africans called it progress. For the first time, African nations are dictating the price of their own resources. They're negotiating from a position of power, not desperation. This is why the US and Europe are nervous. Because when Africa industrializes, it doesn't just grow, it reshapes global economics. Africa is not the future. Africa is the present, and it's rewriting the rules. While Africa found its voice, China and India were building the megaphones. China's Belt and Road Initiative, launched in 2013, has become the largest infrastructure project in human history. Over $1 trillion invested in ports, highways, and power plants across Asia and Africa. These projects aren't just construction, they're connection. Railways from Djibouti to Addis Ababa, ports in Tanzania and Kenya, power grids linking Zambia to Mozambique. Every bridge, every rail line, every factory is a statement. The center of gravity is moving east and south. India, meanwhile, has built soft power through technology and trade. Its digital payment systems are being adopted in Kenya and Nigeria. Its pharmaceutical exports now dominate African markets. And Indian startups are partnering with African universities to train engineers and coders. Unlike the colonial deals of the past, these partnerships focus on mutual growth. China gets resources and markets. Africa gets infrastructure and industrialization. India gets technology and trade. Together, they're forging a tri-power corridor that bypasses Western control. And here's the revolutionary part. They're trading in their own currencies. Africa and China are settling deals in yuan and local tender. India is signing agreements using rupees. Within BRICS, a new reserve currency backed by gold and commodities is already in testing. For Washington, this is a nightmare scenario. If oil, minerals, and trade stop flowing through the U.S. dollar, the global demand for it collapses. That means inflation, higher debt, and a weaker American economy. De-dollarization is no longer theory, it's reality. China now buys Saudi oil in yuan. India buys Russian crude in rupees. Africa is exploring a pan-African digital currency. Bit by bit, the monopoly breaks. And behind the numbers lies a deeper story. These countries share something the West lost: the belief that economic power can serve national dignity. For China and India, helping Africa rise isn't charity, it's strategy. For Africa, working with them isn't dependence, it's liberation. That's why Western critics keep warning about debt traps and authoritarian influence. Because they see what's coming: a multipolar world where no one power dictates to everyone else. The West's century-long dominance was built on control. Africa, China, and India's rise is built on cooperation. And that's a game the old system can't win. What happens when these three giants fully align? A new world order, not ruled by bombs or banks, but by balance. Their combined GDP already exceeds $25 trillion. Their population surpasses 3.5 billion. Their growth rates outpace the West 3-1. Economists call it the largest wealth transfer in modern history. Africa's natural resources fuel China's factories. India's software powers African logistics. Chinese investment builds the ports that ship Indian goods. Every connection strengthens their independence. And the ripple effects are global. Western manufacturing is shrinking. The dollar's dominance is fading. Sanctions are losing power. Even U.S. allies are hedging bets, joining BRICS meetings, signing yuan deals, exploring African investments. Meanwhile, African states are forming defense pacts, agricultural unions, and sovereign wealth funds. They're buying gold, not bonds. They're investing in their own people. This is what the West never expected: a global South that no longer needs saving, because it's saving itself. When you control the minerals, the manufacturing, and the markets, you control the future. And for the first time since colonial times, Africa is holding the pen that writes it. The West can resist, sanction, or criticize, but the momentum is unstoppable. Every crisis, every conflict only accelerates the shift. The $10 trillion alliance is not about revenge. It's about balance, a world where no single power can bully another, where wealth is created, not extracted, where nations rise together, not at each other's expense. The next century won't belong to the few. It will belong to the many. In boardrooms and parliaments, in minds and marketplaces, a quiet truth is emerging. The global order built after World War II is collapsing under its own weight. It was never designed for fairness. It was designed for control. But Africa, China, and India are rewriting the rules. The U.S. dollar, once the symbol of power, is losing its shine. New trade routes bypass the Atlantic. New currencies are being minted, and new voices are leading the conversation. The irony? The same countries once called developing are now developing the world. Africa is the engine of resources and youth. China is the architect of infrastructure. India is the brain of digital innovation. Together, they're shaping an age of multipolar prosperity. For the West, this is a challenge. For the world, it's hope. Because when power spreads, peace becomes possible. When wealth is shared, growth becomes sustainable. When nations stand equal, respect replaces dominance. This is the meaning of the $10 trillion shift. It's not just about money. It's about humanity rediscovering balance. In the years ahead, historians will mark this decade as the moment everything changed. When Africa stopped exporting dreams and started living them. When Asia stopped imitating the West and started inspiring it. When the South rose not in anger, but in confidence. The world will never be the same. And that's exactly the point.
Welcome to African Spotlight 24, your premier source for news and current affairs from across the continent. We're glad you're here. If you're new to our channel, please subscribe, like, and turn on notification to stay up to date with the latest news and analysis. Your support helps us reach more people. Disclaimer: the content of this video is based on credible, publicly available information and is intended for educational, analytical, and informational purposes only. African Spotlight 24 does not promote hate, violence, misinformation, or political unrest. Our goal is to deliver thoughtful insights, highlight local voices, and encourage informed conversations throughout Africa.